The ice that had supported countless generations of hunters gave way without warning, sending Nukka and his dog team plummeting into darkness. What should have been certain death became the discovery that would change everything. Deep beneath the Arctic wasteland, where no living thing should exist, something massive pulsed with alien warmth. The structure stretched beyond the reach of his flashlight, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. When Nukka finally escaped with his remaining dogs, he carried proof that defied every law of nature. The village elders refused to believe him until he showed them the fragment that glowed without heat, hummed without sound, and seemed to bend light around its edges. Scientists arrived within days, their instruments failing to explain what lay buried beneath millennia of ice. But the real question wasn't what it was who built it, and why they left it there waiting to be found. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind-carved patterns in the snow that only Nukka could read. Ancient messages written in a language older than words. At 34, he had spent more than half his life learning to interpret the Arctic's moods, following in the footsteps of his grandfather Tulimak, whose hunting knife now rested at Nukka's hip like a talisman against the unknown. The blade had been forged from meteorite iron generations ago, its dark metal holding an edge that never seemed to dull. Tulimak had carried it through 40 seasons of hunting, and before him his father had used it to survive the great ice storms of the early 1900s. The knife represented more than mere utility. It embodied the accumulated wisdom of men who understood that survival depended on respecting forces beyond human control. Nukka's village of Ikayuak clung to the coastline like a collection of determined spirits, refusing to abandon their earthly post. 200 souls called this place home, their brightly painted houses standing defiant against the monochromatic landscape that stretched endlessly in all directions. The modern world had touched them. Satellite internet, snowmobiles, and solar panels dotted the settlement, but the old ways remained strong. Elder Anana sat in her kitchen every morning, reading the weather in her arthritic joints with accuracy that put meteorologists to shame. She claimed the bones of her ancestors whispered warnings about disturbances in the natural order, messages that grew more urgent with each passing season. The ice speaks differently now, she had told Nukka just days before his fateful hunt. Something stirs beneath the old places. The spirits grow restless. Nukka had nodded respectfully while privately dismissing her concerns as the superstitions of age. He trusted in tangible things. The thickness of ice measured by his spear, the behavior of his dogs, the weight of his grandfather's knife against his leg. These were constants in a world that seemed increasingly uncertain. His team of 8 huskies represented the finest bloodlines in the region. The dog Siku possessed an almost supernatural ability to sense dangerous ice, her ears rotating like radar dishes to catch sounds inaudible to human perception. Behind her, the other 7 dogs formed a perfectly balanced unit, each animal trained from puppyhood to respond to voice commands that could mean the difference between safe passage and catastrophic failure. The morning of the accident had begun like countless others. Nukka loaded his sled with hunting gear, emergency supplies, and the satellite beacon that connected him to the outside world. The device represented modern safety protocols overlaid on ancient practices, a compromise between tradition and technological necessity that characterized contemporary Arctic life. Weather patterns had been unusual all season. Temperatures fluctuated wildly, creating ice conditions that defied generations of accumulated knowledge. What should have been solid, reliable surfaces showed unexpected weaknesses. Local hunters whispered about changes they couldn't explain, sounds from beneath the ice that didn't match the familiar, groaning of thermal expansion and contraction. Nukka's intended route followed a traditional hunting corridor that his family had used for over a century. The path crossed a section of sea ice that had never failed, supported by underwater currents that created consistently stable conditions. His grandfather had taught him to read the ice like a book, the color variations that indicated thickness, the sound patterns that revealed hidden stresses, the subtle visual clues that separated safe passage from deadly trap. The dogs sensed something wrong before Nukka did. Siku's behavior shifted subtly, her confident trot becoming more cautious, her head tilting to catch sounds that remained beyond human hearing. The other dogs responded to her unease, their formation tightening instinctively as they approached the section of ice that would soon betray them all. Nukka checked his gear one final time, ensuring that emergency supplies remained accessible. The satellite beacon blinked reassuringly green, confirming its connection to rescue services hundreds of miles away. His grandfather's knife sat secure in its sheath, a physical reminder of survival skills passed down through generations of men who had faced the Arctic's worst and lived to share their wisdom. The ice ahead looked perfect, thick, white and solid enough to support a truck. Nothing in Nukka's extensive experience suggested danger. Every indicator he had learned to trust pointed towards safe passage across familiar territory. The dogs showed mild nervousness, but Arctic animals often displayed caution that seemed excessive to human judgment. As they approached the spot where everything would change, Nukka felt a moment of perfect confidence in his abilities, his equipment, and his understanding of the environment that had shaped his entire existence. The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow, creating a landscape of such pristine beauty that it seemed impossible anything could disturb its ancient peace. Then the ice began to sing. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. A deep harmonic resonance that seemed to originate within the ice itself. Siku stopped so abruptly that the entire team bunched together, their instincts screaming warnings that transcended species barriers. Nukka had never heard anything like it, a musical tone that vibrated through his bones and made his teeth ache. The emergency beacon on his belt began emitting erratic chirps, its usually steady green light flickering between red and amber. Nukka pulled the device free, examining its display with growing confusion. The GPS coordinates showed impossible readings, numbers that placed him simultaneously at his current location and somewhere deep underground. The emergency frequency crackled with static that formed almost musical patterns. "Easy, Siku," he called to his lead dog, but his voice sounded strange in the crystalline air. The other dogs whined and shifted nervously, their primitive understanding of the world telling them something fundamental had changed. The ice beneath the sled began to emit a soft blue glow, barely visible in the morning sunlight but unmistakably present. Nukka had spent his entire life on Arctic ice and had never seen anything remotely similar. The luminescence pulsed in rhythm with the harmonic sound. As if the frozen surface had suddenly developed a heartbeat, he dismounted from the sled, testing the ice with his spear in the traditional manner his grandfather had taught him. The tool penetrated normally, meeting the expected resistance of thick, solid ice. But when he withdrew it, the hole glowed with the same blue light, and the beacon in his hand went completely silent. The dogs became increasingly agitated, their pack behavior shifting toward panic. Nukka had trained with these animals for years, learning to interpret every subtle signal of their body language. What he saw now transcended normal canine anxiety. This was primal terror, the kind of fear that predated human civilization and spoke to dangers written in genetic memory. The harmonic sound intensified, joined by others at different frequencies, until the air itself seemed to vibrate with complex musical chords. The emergency beacon screen flickered and died, its sophisticated electronics apparently unable to function in proximity to whatever lay beneath the ice. Nukka's rational mind struggled to process what his senses reported. The ice remained solid beneath his boots, showing no visible signs of structural compromise. Yet the dog's behavior, the strange sounds, and the beacon's malfunction suggested something unprecedented was occurring. He decided to retreat, trusting in animal instincts that had evolved over thousands of years to detect dangers humans couldn't perceive. But as he moved toward the sled, the ice directly beneath Siku began to crack with sounds like gunshots echoing across the frozen landscape. The fractures spread with impossible speed, creating a spiderweb pattern that encompassed the entire team within seconds. Nukka lunged toward his dogs, desperate to unhitch them before the surface collapsed entirely. His hands worked frantically at the harness connections, muscle memory competing with rising panic as the blue glow intensified beneath their feet. Siku broke free first, her powerful legs driving her towards solid ice 20 yards away. 3 other dogs followed, their traces snapping under the strain of desperate flight. But Nukka and the remaining 4 animals found themselves trapped on an island of cracking ice that glowed like captured aurora. The harmonic sounds reached a crescendo that seemed to shake the entire Arctic landscape. Snow cascaded from distant ridges, and the air itself shimmered with energy that made Nukka's skin crawl with static electricity. The emergency beacon in his hand grew warm, then hot, forcing him to drop it onto the glowing ice. The moment the device touched the luminescent surface, everything changed. The ice didn't simply break, it dissolved, opening like a flower bloom to reveal a chasm that descended far beyond the reach of sunlight. The remaining dogs fell first, their terrified howls echoing off walls that shouldn't exist. Nukka grabbed desperately for the sled's anchor rope, his fingers closing around it just as the last solid ice gave way beneath his boots. The fall lasted both forever and no time at all. He caught glimpses of impossible architecture carved into walls of living rock, surfaces that curved in directions that hurt his eyes to follow. The emergency beacon tumbled past him, its dead screen reflecting light from sources he couldn't identify. When he finally struck bottom, landing in snow so deep it cushioned what should have been a fatal impact. Nukka found himself in a cavern that defied every law of nature he understood. The walls stretched upward into darkness, but ahead of him, something massive pulsed with the same blue glow that had consumed his world above. 2 of his dogs had survived the fall, whimpering softly as they struggled through the deep snow toward him. The emergency beacon lay nearby, its casing cracked, but its screen suddenly blazing with readings that made no sense. Coordinates that placed him at the center of the Earth, temperatures that should have been impossible to survive, and electromagnetic readings that exceeded the device's measurement capabilities. Above them, impossibly far away, a circle of daylight marked the entrance to a reality that now seemed as distant as the stars. The cavern air carried warmth that defied physics, a gentle heat that made no sense miles beneath Arctic ice. Nukka's breath didn't form clouds, though moments before falling through the surface, the temperature had been 40 below zero. His surviving dogs, Siku and Tapisa, pressed against his legs for comfort rather than warmth, their primitive instincts recognizing they had entered a realm where normal rules no longer applied. The structure that dominated the cavern seemed to breathe with its own internal light. Nukka estimated its height at perhaps 300 feet, though the geometry hurt his eyes when he tried to focus on specific details. The surface appeared to be constructed from a material that resembled polished obsidian, yet light moved through it in ways that glass couldn't achieve. As he approached the base of the structure, his fingers traced along a section of wall that felt warm and smooth as human skin. Embedded within the surface, he discovered what appeared to be carved stones, each one roughly the size of his palm. The symbols etched into their surfaces defied immediate comprehension, angular patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed peripherally. Nukka pried one of the symbol stones from its setting, surprised by how easily it separated from the surrounding material. The moment his fingers made contact with the carved surface, the symbols began to move with deliberate purpose, rearranging themselves into new configurations that triggered recognition centers in his brain he hadn't known existed. The stone grew warm in his hands, and suddenly the air around him filled with images that weren't quite hallucinations, but weren't entirely real either. He saw vast cities that had never existed on Earth's surface, populated by figures that walked upright like humans, but possessed characteristics that belonged to no terrestrial species. Their elongated skulls and multiple arm joints suggested evolution along paths that earthly biology had never explored. The visions continued, showing him glimpses of technologies that operated on principles beyond human understanding. Machines that drew energy from space itself, transportation devices that folded distance like origami, communication systems that connected minds across galactic distances. The symbol stone pulsed in rhythm with these revelations, its carved patterns flowing like liquid while maintaining their essential structure. Siku whined softly, her sensitive hearing detecting frequencies beyond human perception. The sound emanated from deep within the structure, a complex harmony that suggested machinery of vast scope operating according to purposes that remained mysterious. Nukka realized that what he had initially taken for architectural ornamentation was actually functional technology. Systems that had been running continuously for periods, measured in geological time. The walls surrounding the central structure contained thousands of additional symbol stones, each one potentially holding visions that could reshape human understanding of reality. Nukka felt overwhelmed by the implications, his mind struggling to process discoveries that challenged fundamental assumptions about Earth's history and humanity's place in the universe. He examined the stone in his hands more carefully, noting that its weight seemed to fluctuate depending on how he held it. When positioned one way, it felt heavy as lead. Rotated 90 degrees, it became light as foam. The symbols continued their slow dance across its surface, occasionally forming patterns that resembled mathematical equations or star charts. The structure's internal illumination shifted subtly, as if responding to his presence. Areas that had been dim began glowing more brightly, while sections that had blazed with light softened to more comfortable levels. Nukka got the distinct impression that the entire complex was aware of his presence and was actively accommodating his needs. His examination of the cavern revealed additional mysteries that deepened with each discovery. The walls showed tool marks that suggested construction rather than natural formation, yet the scale of the excavation implied engineering capabilities beyond anything human civilization had achieved. The precision of the carving work indicated technologies that could manipulate stone with the accuracy of a sculptor working in clay. The temperature remained comfortable, despite the impossible depth below ground. No visible heat sources existed, yet the air maintained perfect conditions for human survival. Nukka's analytical mind recognized this as evidence of environmental control systems that operated according to principles his culture had no framework to comprehend. The dogs explored the cavern with growing confidence, their initial terror giving way to curiosity as they encountered no immediate threats. They sniffed at areas where the symbol stones clustered most densely, their enhanced senses detecting chemical signatures that meant nothing to human perception, but clearly conveyed information to canine consciousness. Nukka slipped the symbol stone into his parka pocket, feeling its warmth against his chest like a second heartbeat. The visions continued sporadically, triggered by his emotional state, or perhaps by proximity to other technological elements embedded throughout the structure. Each glimpse revealed additional layers of complexity that suggested civilizations spanning millions of years and technologies that treated physical laws as suggestions rather than absolute constraints. As he prepared to explore deeper into the cavern system, Nukka understood that he carried in his pocket proof that would challenge everything humanity believed about its origins, its history, and its future. The search for an escape route became desperate as hours passed in the impossible cavern. Nukka's flashlight beam swept across walls that seemed to extend infinitely upward, offering no obvious path back to the surface world. The circle of daylight that had marked his entry point appeared unreachable, hundreds of feet above and accessible only to creatures capable of flight. His two surviving dogs followed him through passages that branched off from the main chamber, their superior senses guiding them toward air currents that suggested connections to the outside world. Siku paused at what appeared to be a dead end, pawing at debris that had accumulated against the cavern wall over countless years. Nukka brushed away centuries of accumulated dust and discovered something that shouldn't exist, a coil of rope unlike any material he had ever encountered. The fiber possessed a silvery sheen that reflected light without creating glare, and when he tested its strength, it felt simultaneously flexible as silk and strong as steel cable. The rope showed no signs of age, despite being buried beneath layers of sediment that suggested incredible antiquity. The material felt warm to the touch, maintaining a temperature slightly above that of human skin, regardless of the surrounding environment. When Nukka examined it closely, he noticed that the individual fibers appeared to be woven from strands so fine they approached invisibility. Yet the overall construction created a rope roughly half an inch in diameter. Testing the rope's capabilities revealed properties that defied conventional understanding of materials science. A 20-foot section could support his full weight without showing any sign of stress or elongation. When he attempted to cut it with his grandfather's meteorite knife, the blade slid along the surface without leaving so much as a scratch. The rope seemed to possess a tensile strength that exceeded anything in human experience. Siku led him deeper into the passage system, following scent trails that suggested previous visitors to these underground chambers. The rope extended far beyond what Nukka had initially discovered, coiled in neat arrangements that implied deliberate placement rather than random abandonment. Someone or something had stored these materials with the expectation of future need. The passage eventually opened into a natural chimney that rose toward distant light. The walls showed evidence of artificial modification, with handholds carved at regular intervals and platforms positioned to provide resting spots during what would obviously be an exhausting climb. The rope had been anchored at various points along the ascent route, creating a complex system that could support climbers even if individual sections failed. Nukka realized that whoever had constructed this escape system possessed intimate knowledge of the cavern's structure and had anticipated the need for emergency egress. The placement of the rope demonstrated engineering sophistication that considered factors like load distribution, redundant safety systems, and the physical limitations of users who might need to climb while injured or exhausted. Tapisa whined softly, her sensitive hearing detecting sounds from above that suggested the passage connected to surface winds. The rope system extended upward beyond the reach of Nukka's flashlight, but the steady current of fresh air indicated a viable route to the outside world. His chances of survival had suddenly improved dramatically. The climb would be treacherous, even with the mysterious rope's assistance. Nukka estimated the vertical distance at several hundred feet, a journey that would test his strength and endurance under the best circumstances. Carrying his dogs would make the ascent nearly impossible, yet abandoning them was unthinkable after they had survived the initial fall. He fashioned a harness system using strips torn from his parka, creating a way to secure each dog against his chest during the climb. The arrangement would be awkward and exhausting, but it offered the only possibility of bringing his companions back to the surface world. Siku accepted the improvised harness with patient dignity, while Tapisa required more convincing before submitting to the unusual arrangement. The rope's properties became even more remarkable during the actual ascent. Despite supporting the weight of a man and two dogs, it showed no tendency to stretch or develop weak points where it rubbed against rocky projections. The surface texture provided excellent grip, even when Nukka's hands became slick with perspiration, and the material seemed to actively assist the climbing process by distributing his weight in ways that reduced fatigue. As they climbed higher, The air grew colder, and the distant circle of light gradually expanded. Nukka's muscles burned from the sustained effort, but the rope system's intelligent design allowed for regular rest stops on the carved platforms. During these breaks, he examined sections of the rope more closely, noting that its construction incorporated patterns that resembled the symbols he had seen on the stones below. Hours into the climb, with daylight growing larger and more defined above them, Nukka began to understand that his rescue depended entirely on technology left behind by the same beings who had constructed the impossible structure below. They had anticipated human visitors and had prepared systems to ensure survival. The implications of such foresight suggested planning that spanned geological ages and knowledge that encompassed intimate details of human physiology and psychology. The village elders gathered in Anana's kitchen as the sun reached its zenith, their weathered faces reflecting skepticism that had protected their people from false prophets and madmen for generations. Nukka sat at the worn wooden table where community decisions had been made for decades, his hands trembling slightly as he prepared to share an account that would challenge everything his people believed about the world beneath. Their feet, Elder Anana studied his face with eyes that had learned to distinguish truth from delusion through 70 years of Arctic survival. She reached into a carved wooden box that had belonged to her grandmother, withdrawing an object that made the assembled elders lean forward with sudden attention. The truth stone had been used by their people since time immemorial to determine when spoken words carried the weight of genuine experience. The stone itself appeared unremarkable, a piece of dark green jade, roughly the size of a child's fist, polished smooth by countless hands and worn thin by generations of use. Traditional markings covered its surface, symbols that predated written language and spoke to concepts that required no translation between cultures. When held by someone speaking absolute truth, the stone remained cool and steady. When touched by deception, it grew warm and seemed to vibrate with internal tension. Nukka accepted the truth stone from Anana's hands, feeling its familiar weight and texture. He had been tested with this same artifact as a child, learning the importance of honesty in a culture where lies could mean death for entire communities. The stone had never failed to detect falsehood, though the elders admitted they didn't understand the principles that governed its function. "Tell us about the ice," Anana commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had guided the village through crises that had claimed other settlements. "Tell us what you found beneath the old places." Nukka began his account carefully, starting with details that could be verified: the unusual weather patterns, the strange behavior of his dogs, the sounds that had preceded the ice collapse. The truth stone remained cool in his hands, its surface maintaining the temperature of the surrounding air as he described events that, while extraordinary, fell within the realm of natural possibility. As he progressed to descriptions of the cavern and the impossible structure, the assembled elders watched the truth stone with growing amazement. By all traditional understanding, such claims should have triggered the stone's warning mechanisms. Stories of underground civilizations and impossible technologies belonged to mythology, not lived experience. Yet the artifact continued to indicate absolute honesty. "The walls were covered with symbols that moved when I watched them," Nukka continued, pulling the symbol stone from his parka pocket. "And this came from something that has been waiting beneath our hunting grounds for longer than our people have existed." The moment he placed the symbol stone on the table beside the truth stone, both artifacts began exhibiting behavior that stunned the watching elders. The truth stone, which had remained passive throughout Nukka's account, suddenly blazed with internal light. The traditional markings on its surface began glowing with the same blue radiance that had emanated from the underground structure. Elder Tutu, the village's oldest resident at 84 years, leaned forward with recognition dawning in his ancient eyes. "The old stories," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind that perpetually swept across the Arctic landscape. My grandfather told me about stones that sang when the deep spirits stirred. I thought they were just stories meant to teach children respect. For the old places, the symbol stone responded to the truth stone's activation by displaying patterns that flowed across its surface like liquid mercury. The symbols arranged themselves into configurations that none of the elders could read, yet somehow conveyed meaning that bypassed rational understanding and spoke directly to deeper centers of recognition. Anana touched both stones simultaneously, her fingers immediately detecting energies that made her skin tingle with static electricity. The traditional markings on the truth stone were responding to proximity with technology that predated human civilization, suggesting connections between ancient knowledge and forces that their ancestors had encountered but never fully understood. Our people have stories about the time before ice, she said slowly, her voice taking on the cadence used for passing down sacred knowledge. Stories about teachers who came from the sky and showed our ancestors how to survive the great cold. We thought they were metaphors for learning wisdom from experience. The other elders nodded with growing understanding. Traditional stories that had been preserved for thousands of years through oral tradition suddenly took on new significance. Legends about visitors from distant stars, about knowledge hidden beneath the ice, about artifacts that connected their people to forces beyond earthly understanding. All of it resonated with Nukka's impossible discoveries. Young Malik, Anana's great-nephew, who had studied at universities in the south, examined both artifacts with the analytical mindset of modern education, combined with traditional cultural knowledge. If these stories are historical records rather than mythology, he said carefully, then we need to contact people who can understand what this means for everyone. Not just our village. Dr. Sarah Chen received the call during her lunch break at the University of Toronto's Archaeological Institute, where she had spent the last 8 years studying pre-Columbian Arctic cultures. The voice on the other end belonged to Malik Kanguk, whose undergraduate thesis on traditional Inuit knowledge systems had impressed her enough to maintain periodic contact after his graduation. Dr. Chen, you need to see something that changes everything we understand about Arctic prehistory. Malik's voice carried an urgency that made her pause mid-bite of her sandwich. A hunter from our village has discovered artifacts that predate any known human civilization in North America. Sarah's initial skepticism melted as Malik described the circumstances of Nukka's discovery and the village elders' authentication process using traditional methods. She had learned to respect indigenous knowledge systems during her fieldwork, recognizing that oral traditions often preserved historical information with accuracy that exceeded written records. When Malik emailed photographs of the symbol stone, Sarah's academic world shifted beneath her feet. The images showed craftsmanship that belonged to no known culture, combined with materials that appeared to possess properties impossible for ancient metallurgy. She forwarded the pictures to colleagues specializing in various fields, receiving responses that ranged from confused fascination to outright disbelief. Dr. James Morrison from MIT's Materials Science Department called within hours of receiving the images. Sarah, I need to examine this artifact personally. The electromagnetic signatures visible in these photographs suggest technologies that shouldn't exist in archaeological contexts. Sarah booked a flight to Iqaluit that same evening, then chartered a small aircraft for the final leg to Iqaluit. Her equipment cases contained spectrometers, carbon dating apparatus, and electromagnetic field detectors, instruments that represented the pinnacle of modern scientific analysis. She also packed cameras capable of capturing details, invisible to human observation, and communication equipment that would allow real-time consultation with experts worldwide. The flight over the Arctic landscape provided her with perspective on the isolation that had preserved Nukka's discovery from outside interference. Endless expanses of ice and tundra stretched in all directions, broken only by occasional settlements that appeared as tiny clusters of artificial color against the monochromatic wilderness. Nukka met her at the village's small airstrip, his presence immediately conveying the competence and groundedness she had learned to associate with people whose survival depended on accurate observation of environmental conditions. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced extraordinary circumstances and emerged with his sanity intact. The symbol stone rested on a makeshift laboratory table in the village's community center, surrounded by her scientific instruments like ancient magic, confronting modern technology. The moment Sarah activated her electromagnetic field detector, the device began registering readings that defied every principle she had learned during 2 decades of scientific training. The spectrometer readings showed energy signatures that fluctuated beyond the instrument's measurement capabilities. Electromagnetic fields surrounding the artifact shifted in patterns that resembled communication protocols more than random energy emissions. When she attempted to take precise measurements, the stone seemed to respond by modulating its output in ways that suggested awareness of the testing process. "This is impossible," she whispered, checking and rechecking her equipment for malfunctions that might explain the anomalous readings. Every instrument confirmed the same incredible data. The artifact was emitting energy at levels that should have made it lethal to handle, yet it remained completely safe for direct contact. Carbon dating attempts produced results that made no sense within established archaeological frameworks. The organic materials embedded within the stones construction registered ages that placed their origin millions of years before complex life evolved on Earth. Yet the artifact showed no signs of degradation or age-related deterioration. Dr. Morrison joined the analysis via satellite video link, his expression growing increasingly amazed as Sarah shared real-time data from her instruments. The electromagnetic resonance patterns match theoretical models for quantum field manipulation, he said, his voice barely containing his excitement. This artifact is demonstrating technologies that our most advanced research facilities can only hypothesize about. Sarah documented everything with obsessive thoroughness, understanding that her career and credibility depended on providing unassailable evidence for claims that would challenge fundamental assumptions about human history and technological development. The photographs, measurements, and video recordings accumulated into a database that would either revolutionize archaeology or destroy her professional reputation. As night fell over the Arctic village, Sarah sat in Anana's kitchen drinking tea and trying to process implications that extended far beyond academic disciplines. The artifact in her possession represented proof that advanced civilizations had existed on Earth long before human history began. Using technologies that modern science was still struggling to understand, the symbol stone pulsed gently on the table between them, its carved patterns flowing in configurations that suggested it was actively responding to the scientific analysis, perhaps even communicating information that humans lacked the knowledge to interpret. The return journey to the crash site required 3 days of preparation as Dr. Chen's scientific team assembled equipment capable of operating in extreme Arctic conditions. Nukka watched the preparations with growing unease, understanding that each additional person increased the risk of disturbing forces that had remained dormant beneath the ice for geological ages. The exact location of the cavern proved more difficult to pinpoint than expected. The ice surface had shifted and reformed in the weeks since Nukka's accident, erasing the visual landmarks that normally guided Arctic navigation. GPS coordinates seemed unreliable, with readings fluctuating wildly as the team approached the general area where the discovery had occurred. Dr. Chen deployed ground-penetrating radar equipment, hoping to detect the void space that Nukka described. The instruments registered confusing signals that suggested both empty space and solid mass occupying the same coordinates. Her geological survey tools indicated impossible density variations in the ice, as if the frozen surface existed in multiple states simultaneously. Siku, Nukka's lead dog who had survived the original fall, began exhibiting the same nervous behavior that had preceded the ice collapse. Her ears rotated constantly, tracking sounds beyond human perception, and her reluctance to approach certain areas provided more reliable guidance than the scientific instruments. The team's navigation problems resolved when one of Dr. Chen's graduate students discovered a crystalline formation protruding through the ice, surface approximately 50 yards from their GPS target coordinates. The crystal stood 3 feet tall and resembled quartz in general appearance, but its internal structure contained geometric patterns that had clearly been artificially created. Nukka approached the crystal, with recognition dawning in his eyes. "This wasn't here before," he said, kneeling beside the formation and noting how its faceted surfaces caught and reflected sunlight in ways that created rainbow patterns on the surrounding ice. "Something pushed it up through the surface after I escaped." Dr. Chen's electromagnetic field detectors immediately began registering intense activity around the crystal. The artifact generated a localized magnetic field, strong enough to interfere with compass readings within a 30-foot radius. When she attempted to take core samples for analysis, her diamond-tipped drill bits became magnetized and were drawn toward the crystal's base with force that nearly pulled the equipment from her hands. The crystal's most remarkable property revealed itself when team members approached from different directions. The geometric patterns within its structure appeared to rotate and realign, creating the optical illusion that the artifact was constantly turning to face whoever observed it. Photography proved challenging because the crystal's internal patterns shifted between camera exposures, making documentation of its true structure nearly impossible. Graduate student David Park noticed that his GPS unit began displaying coherent readings when held within 3 feet of the crystal. The previously erratic coordinates stabilized, and the device began showing their location with accuracy that exceeded normal GPS precision. More significantly, the unit's display began indicating additional coordinate sets that pointed toward locations deep beneath the ice. "It's functioning as a navigation beacon," Dr. Chen realized, watching as her instruments provided increasingly detailed information about the underground structure. "This crystal is actively guiding us toward the discovery site." The team used the crystal's guidance to locate the precise point where Nukka had fallen through the ice. The surface appeared completely normal, showing no signs of the catastrophic collapse that had occurred weeks earlier. Yet when Dr. Chen's ground-penetrating radar focused on the coordinates provided by the crystal, the instruments revealed a vast empty space that extended hundreds of feet in all directions. Nukka studied the reformed ice with the experienced eye of someone who had spent decades reading Arctic conditions. "The ice repaired itself," he said, his voice carrying amazement that transcended his usual stoic demeanor. "But it's not natural ice. Look at the crystal structure." Dr. Chen examined the surface more closely, noting that the supposedly reformed ice displayed properties that defied conventional understanding of water crystallization. The molecular structure appeared too regular, too perfect, as if it had been manufactured rather than formed through natural processes. When she deployed thermal imaging equipment, the results showed temperature variations that mapped precisely onto the underground structure's layout. Heat signatures rose from the depths below, maintaining the surface ice at temperatures that should have caused immediate melting. Yet the reformed surface remained solid and stable, supporting the full weight of the team and their equipment. Crystal continued to pulse with internal light as the scientific analysis proceeded, its beacon-like properties providing navigation data that grew more detailed and specific with each passing hour. The artifact was clearly designed to guide visitors to the underground structure, suggesting that whoever had created it intended for the discovery to be found by precisely the kind of expedition that had now assembled. As evening approached, Dr. Chen faced the decision that would determine whether her team would become explorers of humanity's greatest discovery or casualties of forces beyond their comprehension. The descent into the cavern required engineering solutions that pushed the limits of Arctic expedition capabilities. Dr. Chen's team established a base camp directly above the coordinates indicated by the navigation crystal, then used industrial drilling equipment to create an access shaft through the artificially reformed ice. The drilling process revealed layers of material that alternated between natural ice and substances that defied glacification. Nukka guided the team through the underground passages he had navigated during his desperate escape, their high-powered lighting systems revealing architectural details that became more impossible with each step deeper into the structure. The walls showed tool marks that indicated precision manufacturing techniques, yet the scale of the excavation suggested construction projects spanning centuries. Dr. Chen documented everything with obsessive thoroughness, understanding that her recordings would provide the only reliable evidence for discoveries that would challenge every established scientific discipline. Her cameras captured details invisible to casual observation, symbols that changed configuration between photographs, surfaces that reflected light in ways that suggested non-Euclidean geometry, materials that appeared solid but registered as transparent to certain electromagnetic frequencies. The main chamber opened before them, like a cathedral designed by beings who understood architecture as both art and science. The central structure dominated the space with proportions that created a sense of awe bordering on religious experience. Graduate student David Park estimated its height at over 400 feet, though the geometric complexities made precise measurement impossible using conventional surveying techniques. As the team approached the structure's base, motion sensors embedded in Dr. Chen's equipment began detecting activity within the apparently solid walls. Thermal imaging revealed patterns of energy circulation that resembled biological processes more than mechanical systems. The structure was not merely ancient technology. It was alive in ways that transcended traditional definitions of life. The moment Dr. Chen placed her hand against the structure's surface, a section of the wall became transparent, revealing an interior chamber filled with devices that challenged her understanding of physics. Crystalline formations resembling technological components lined the walls, connected by networks of energy conduits that pulsed with the same blue light that characterized all aspects of the underground. Complex, at the center of the revealed chamber sat an artifact that made everything else seem mundane by comparison. The memory core appeared to be constructed from materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between geometric configurations that hurt the human eye to perceive directly. Surfaces that appeared solid from one angle became translucent from another, creating optical effects that suggested the device operated according to physical laws unknown to terrestrial science. David Park's electromagnetic field detectors registered impossible readings as they approached the memory core. The device generated localized space-time distortions that affected chronometers and made precise time measurement impossible within its immediate vicinity. His GPS unit displayed coordinates that placed the team simultaneously at their current location and at points distributed throughout the solar system. The memory core activated without warning, responding to human presence with systems that had been designed to interface with biological consciousness. Holographic projections filled the chamber with images so detailed and three-dimensional that they seemed more real than reality itself. The team found themselves surrounded by representations of beings that had clearly never evolved on Earth. The holographic figures moved with purpose and intelligence, demonstrating technologies that operated on principles beyond human comprehension. Dr. Chen watched in amazement as the projections showed construction of the underground structure, revealing engineering techniques that manipulated matter at the atomic level and energy systems that drew power from fundamental forces of the universe. The beings in the projections possessed characteristics that suggested evolution in environments radically different from terrestrial conditions. Their elongated limbs and enlarged craniums indicated adaptation to low-gravity environments, while their sensory organs were positioned to detect energy frequencies invisible to human perception. Yet their posture and tool use demonstrated intelligence that paralleled human cognitive development. As the holographic display continued, the team observed scenes that appeared to document the builders' arrival on Earth millions of years ago. The projections showed a planet in the early stages of biological development, with primitive life forms that would eventually evolve into the complex ecosystems that currently dominated the surface world. The memory core's projections revealed construction of multiple structures, identical to the one surrounding them, placed at strategic locations across the planet's surface. The builders had clearly established a global network of monitoring stations, each one designed to observe and record the planet's biological development over geological timescales. Dr. Chen realized she was witnessing historical documentation that predated human civilization by millions of years, preserved in storage systems that operated with perfect reliability across spans of time that made human history seem insignificant. The implications challenged not only archaeology and anthropology, but fundamental assumptions about Earth's place in a universe that clearly contained intelligence, far older and more advanced than anything terrestrial evolution had produced. The holographic display paused, as if waiting for the human observers to process what they had witnessed before, revealing additional information that would prove even more transformative. The holographic projections shifted to reveal scenes that fundamentally altered human understanding of biological development on Earth. Dr. Chen watched in stunned silence as the memory core displayed detailed records of the builders' scientific activities, showing laboratory facilities that had operated continuously for millions of years beneath the planet's surface. The beings in the projections moved through chambers filled with genetic material from thousands of species, their elongated fingers manipulating samples with precision that indicated mastery of biological engineering. The holographic display zoomed in to show molecular-level work that guided evolutionary development along pathways that would never have occurred through natural selection alone. Graduate student David Park pointed to a section of the chamber wall that had become transparent during the projection sequence, revealing physical storage units that contained actual samples of the genetic material shown in the holographic records. The genetic archive stretched beyond the reach of their portable lighting, suggesting collections that encompassed every significant evolutionary development in Earth's history. Dr. Chen approached the nearest storage unit with scientific excitement that overcame her instinctive caution. The crystalline containers held specimens suspended in a medium that maintained perfect preservation across geological timescales. She recognized forms that corresponded to evolutionary transitions that had puzzled paleontologists for decades, the missing links that connected major developmental stages in terrestrial biology. The archive contained more than passive storage systems. As Dr. Chen examined the genetic samples more closely, her electromagnetic field detectors registered energy signatures that suggested active manipulation of the stored material. The containers were not merely preserving ancient specimens, they were maintaining living genetic templates that could potentially be used to recreate extinct species or guide future evolutionary development. The holographic display continued, showing the builder's intervention in critical evolutionary moments that had shaped the development of complex life on Earth, mass extinction events that had been attributed to asteroid impacts or volcanic activity were revealed as carefully orchestrated genetic bottlenecks designed to eliminate evolutionary dead ends and promote the development of more sophisticated biological forms. Nukka studied the projections with growing recognition, his traditional knowledge providing context that pure scientific analysis could not achieve. The old stories speak of the time when the sky teachers chose which animals would survive the great dying, he said quietly. Our people thought it was metaphor, but these images show the literal truth. The genetic archive revealed evidence that human development had been subject to the same guided evolution that had shaped every other significant species on Earth. The builders had identified primitive hominids as candidates for enhanced development and had introduced genetic modifications that accelerated cognitive development and physical adaptation to diverse environmental conditions. Dr. Chen discovered storage units that contained human genetic material spanning hundreds of thousands of years of development, documenting modifications that had guided the species toward increased intelligence, enhanced manual dexterity, and improved capacity for complex social organization. The evidence suggested that humanity's remarkable adaptability and cognitive abilities were not products of random evolutionary pressure but results of deliberate genetic engineering. The holographic projections showed construction of additional monitoring stations at locations that corresponded to major centers of human civilization development. The builders had placed observation posts near sites where humans would eventually establish their first cities, their most significant religious centers, and their most important technological advances. The genetic archive contained samples from every human population group that had ever existed, preserved with documentation that tracked the success or failure of various genetic modifications introduced at different points in the species development. Dr. Chen realized she was looking at humanity's true genealogical record, maintained by beings who had served as invisible guardians throughout the entire span of human existence. The storage systems extended beyond terrestrial biology, containing genetic material from species that had evolved on other worlds under radically different environmental conditions. The archive appeared to document the builders' activities across multiple star systems, suggesting a galactic-scale project that involved biological development on hundreds or thousands of planets. David Park's instruments detected communication protocols embedded within the genetic archive's data storage systems. The samples were not merely preserved specimens, but active information repositories that maintained constant contact with similar archives located throughout the galaxy. Humanity's genetic development was apparently being coordinated as part of a larger experiment that involved countless other intelligent species. The holographic display paused at images, showing the builder's decision-making process regarding human development, revealing debates conducted in visual languages that conveyed complex concepts through geometric patterns and color variations. The discussion centered on humanity's readiness to assume greater responsibilities within the galactic community and the appropriate timing for full disclosure of their monitored status. Dr. Chen understood that the genetic archive represented more than historical documentation. It was an active system that continued to influence human development according to plans that spanned millions of years and encompassed goals that extended far beyond anything human civilization had imagined possible. Thank you. Sound of helicopters approaching. The remote Arctic site interrupted Dr. Chen's analysis of the genetic archive, their mechanical roar echoing strangely in the cavern's acoustic environment. Within hours, the scientific expedition found itself surrounded by military personnel who established a perimeter around the discovery site with efficiency that suggested prior planning rather than emergency. Response. Colonel Marcus Webb, a career intelligence officer with experience in situations requiring absolute discretion, descended into the cavern, accompanied by a team of specialists whose equipment indicated capabilities far beyond standard military applications. His presence immediately shifted the expedition's focus from scientific discovery to national security implications. Dr. Chen, your preliminary reports have reached people who make decisions about information that could destabilize global political structures, Webb said, his tone conveying authority that brooked no argument. This site is now under federal jurisdiction, and all personnel are bound by security classifications that make disclosure a federal crime. The military team deployed communication jamming equipment that severed the expedition's contact with the outside world, then established secure satellite links that connected the underground facility directly to command centers in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. The discovery had apparently triggered international protocols for managing information that could affect global stability. Dr. Chen protested the militarization of what should remain a scientific investigation. But her objections were overruled by directives that came from government levels she had never known existed. David Park's documentation equipment was confiscated and replaced with military recording systems that would ensure all information remained under government control. As the military personnel explored deeper into the structure, one of Webb's technical specialists discovered a device that appeared to be designed specifically for long-distance communication. The quantum communicator resembled a crystalline formation similar to the navigation crystal found on the surface, but its internal structure contained geometric patterns that suggested capabilities extending far beyond terrestrial technology. The device activated spontaneously when approached by human personnel, its surface beginning to pulse with energy signatures that Dr. Chen's confiscated instruments would have registered as impossible if she had still possessed access to them. The quantum communicator generated localized space-time distortions that affected chronometers and made precise measurement of temporal flow impossible within its operational radius. Military communication specialists recognized that the device was receiving and transmitting data across distances that exceeded the theoretical limits of electromagnetic radiation. The quantum communicator appeared to be maintaining contact with similar devices located throughout the galaxy, providing instantaneous communication regardless of the vast distances involved. Colonel Webb's security concerns intensified as his team realized that the discovery site was actively connected to intelligence networks that spanned interstellar distances. The quantum communicator was not merely ancient technology, it was currently operational equipment that maintained ongoing contact with the civilization that had constructed it. The device's communication protocols operated according to principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about information theory and the speed of light. Data transmission appeared to occur through quantum entanglement effects that bypassed normal space-time constraints, suggesting mastery of physics that terrestrial science was still struggling to understand. Theoretically, Dr. Chen observed the military team's growing alarm as they realized the implications of an active communication system that connected Earth to galactic networks beyond government control. The quantum communicator represented technology that could not be contained, confiscated, or regulated using conventional approaches to information security. Nukka watched the proceedings with growing unease, understanding that the military presence represented exactly the kind of interference that traditional stories warned against when dealing with forces beyond human comprehension. His cultural knowledge suggested that attempting to control or weaponize the builder's technology would result in consequences that extended far beyond immediate political considerations. The quantum communicator's transmissions intensified in response to the military presence, as if the device was reporting the changed circumstances to distant observers who had been monitoring the discovery process. Energy readings fluctuated beyond the measurement capabilities of military instruments, and the device began generating harmonic frequencies that created resonance effects. Throughout the entire underground structure, Colonel Webb's team detected similar activation, patterns in quantum communicators located at coordinates that corresponded to major population centers worldwide. The devices were apparently part of a global network that had been dormant until human discovery triggered their awakening, suggesting that the builders had anticipated this moment and had prepared systems to respond appropriately. The military's attempts to isolate and study the quantum communicator proved futile, as the device's operational principles transcended conventional understanding of electromagnetic shielding and signal isolation. The technology operated according to physical laws that made containment impossible using terrestrial methods, forcing government authorities to confront the reality that they had encountered forces beyond their ability to control. As the quantum communicator's activity reached unprecedented levels, Dr. Chen realized that humanity had crossed a threshold from which there could be no retreat. The builders were now aware that their monitoring network had been discovered, and their response would determine whether the species they had guided for millions of years was ready for the next phase of development. The quantum communicator's increased activity triggered responses throughout the underground structure that revealed systems Dr. Chen's team had not previously detected. Walls that had appeared to be solid stone began displaying control interfaces that responded to human presence, while energy conduits that had been dormant for millennia suddenly blazed with power that illuminated chambers extending far beyond the reach of their portable lighting equipment. Colonel Webb's technical specialists discovered that one of the newly activated systems appeared to be designed for environmental manipulation on a planetary scale. The environmental controller occupied a chamber the size of a small aircraft hangar, its crystalline components arranged in patterns that suggested capabilities for influencing weather systems, atmospheric composition, and geological processes across entire continents. Dr. Chen gained access to the controller's display systems, which presented information through holographic interfaces that bypassed language barriers by conveying concepts directly to human consciousness. The data revealed that Earth's climate had been artificially regulated for millions of years, with the builder's technology preventing natural variations that would have made the planet uninhabitable for complex life. Forms the environmental controller's historical records showed intervention in every major climate event that had shaped Earth's development. Ice ages had been precisely timed to promote evolutionary pressure that encouraged species adaptation, while periods of global warming had been carefully modulated to prevent runaway greenhouse effects that would have sterilized the planet's surface. David Park's electromagnetic field detectors registered energy signatures that connected the environmental controller to similar systems located at strategic points around the globe. The network appeared to operate as an integrated planetary management system, with individual controllers coordinating their activities to maintain optimal conditions for biological development. The holographic displays revealed that recent climate changes attributed to human industrial activity were actually the result of the environmental controller network's deliberate modifications to global weather patterns. The builders had been gradually reducing their climate intervention, allowing natural processes to resume as humanity developed technological capabilities that might eventually allow the species to manage planetary systems independently. Colonel Webb's security concerns reached new levels as his team realized that the environmental controller possessed capabilities that dwarfed any terrestrial weather modification technology. The system could generate or suppress hurricanes, redirect ocean currents, trigger volcanic eruptions, and manipulate atmospheric chemistry with precision that exceeded human understanding of meteorological processes. The controller's interface revealed that the system was currently active, continuing to regulate global climate according to parameters that had been established millions of years ago. Temperature fluctuations, precipitation patterns, and storm systems that appeared to be natural phenomena were actually the products of technological intervention designed to maintain conditions suitable for human civilization. Dr. Chen discovered that the environmental controller maintained detailed models of every significant weather system on Earth with predictive capabilities that extended decades into the future. The system had been preparing for a transition period when human technology would gradually assume responsibility for planetary climate management. But the timeline for this transition was measured in centuries rather than years. The holographic displays showed that similar environmental controllers operated on hundreds of other worlds throughout the galaxy, each one tailored to the specific atmospheric and geological conditions required by different intelligent species. The builders had apparently developed planetary management as a standard service provided to civilizations that showed potential for technological advancement. Nukka studied the environmental controllers' displays with growing understanding of traditional stories that had described sky spirits who controlled weather and seasonal changes. His people's knowledge of climate patterns and environmental cycles was based on observation of artificially regulated systems rather than purely natural phenomena, explaining why indigenous weather prediction methods often exceeded the accuracy of modern meteorological science. The controller's data revealed that recent acceleration in global climate change was not entirely due to human industrial activity, but was part of a planned transition as the builders gradually reduced their environmental intervention. The system was allowing natural climate variability to resume while providing subtle guidance to prevent catastrophic changes that could threaten human survival. Colonel Webb's team discovered that the environmental controller network responded to commands from the quantum communicator system, suggesting that planetary climate management was coordinated across interstellar distances by the same civilization that maintained the galactic communication network. Earth's weather patterns were apparently subject to oversight by authorities whose jurisdiction extended far beyond terrestrial boundaries. Implications of the environmental controller's capabilities extended beyond climate science to fundamental questions about humanity's relationship with the natural world. Dr. Chen realized that human civilization had developed within an artificially maintained biosphere, raising questions about the species' ability to survive in truly natural conditions. As the environmental controller's systems continued to reveal their scope and sophistication, the assembled team began to understand that humanity's entire existence had been dependent on technological support provided by beings whose knowledge of planetary management exceeded anything terrestrial science had imagined possible. The environmental controller's activation triggered a cascade of responses that revealed the true scope of the builder's global infrastructure. Dr. Chen's instruments detected synchronized energy pulses emanating from locations that corresponded to every major mountain range, oceanic ridge system, and geological formation on Earth. The planet itself was responding to signals originating from the Arctic Discovery Site. Colonel Webb's communications specialists intercepted data transmissions that indicated similar structures were becoming active on every continent simultaneously. Satellite imagery revealed energy signatures at coordinates in Antarctica, the Sahara Desert, the Amazon rainforest, and the Himalayas that matched the electromagnetic patterns detected in the underground facility. The quantum communicators displays began showing a three-dimensional holographic map of Earth with points of light marking locations where identical structures had been constructed millions of years ago. The planetary grid revealed a network of monitoring and control facilities that dwarfed any human technological infrastructure. with installation sites chosen according to criteria that optimized global coverage and geological stability. Dr. Chen realized that humanity had unknowingly built their greatest civilizations within proximity of the builders' installations. Major cities like Rome, Cairo, Beijing, and London were located near grid points where the ancient technology had been influencing human development for thousands of years. The correlation between grid locations and centers of human achievement was too precise to be coincidental. The planetary grid map showed energy conduits, connecting all installation sites through paths that followed natural geological formations. Mountain ranges, ocean currents, and continental drift patterns had been subtly influenced over millions of years to create optimal energy transmission pathways between nodes in the global network. David Park's analysis revealed that the grid operated as an integrated planetary consciousness, with individual installations sharing information and coordinating activities across distances that spanned the globe. The network possessed computational capabilities that exceeded the combined processing power of all human computer systems, operating continuously since before complex life evolved on Earth. The holographic display zoomed in to show individual grid installations, revealing that each site contained the same basic components they had discovered in the Arctic facility. Memory cores, genetic archives, environmental controllers, and quantum communicators were replicated at every node, creating redundant systems that ensured network functionality even if individual sites were damaged or destroyed. Colonel Webb's security team detected increasing activity levels across the entire network as installations that had been dormant for millennia suddenly blazed with energy signatures visible from orbital surveillance systems. The builder's technology was awakening globally, responding to the discovery of the Arctic site with coordinated activation that suggested artificial intelligence. Systems of staggering sophistication. The planetary grid map revealed that the network had been designed to guide human development through a series of predetermined phases, each one corresponding to specific technological and social achievements. The current activation pattern indicated that humanity had reached a critical threshold that triggered the next phase of the builder's long-term plan. Nukka observed the global activation with understanding that came from traditional knowledge systems that had preserved information about the time of great awakening when the sky teachers would reveal themselves to their earthly students. Indigenous cultures worldwide had maintained similar stories about a future time when hidden guardians would emerge from their concealment to guide humanity into a new era. Dr. Chen discovered that the grid installations near major population centers had been influencing human technological development throughout recorded history. Scientific breakthroughs, technological innovations, and cultural advances had been subtly guided by energy fields generated by the nearby installations, explaining why certain geographical regions had consistently produced disproportionate numbers of significant discoveries. The network's data revealed that human civilization had been developed according to a timeline that coordinated Earth's progress with similar projects on hundreds of other worlds throughout the galaxy. Humanity's technological advancement was synchronized with other intelligent species to ensure optimal integration when interstellar contact finally occurred. Colonel Webb's team realized that the global activation could not be contained or controlled using conventional military approaches. The network's capabilities exceeded anything in human arsenals, and its distributed nature made targeted intervention impossible. Government authorities found themselves confronting technology that operated beyond their jurisdiction and capabilities. The planetary grid's awakening triggered responses from installations located in international waters and territories claimed by multiple nations. The network transcended human political boundaries, operating according to authorities and objectives that predated terrestrial governments by millions of years. As energy readings reached unprecedented levels across all grid installations, Dr. Chen understood that humanity was experiencing the beginning of a transformation that would fundamentally alter the species' relationship with both their planet and the larger galactic community. The Builders' Network was preparing to reveal itself fully, ending millions of years of hidden guidance and beginning a new phase of open cooperation between human civilization and their long-concealed mentors. The global awakening of the planetary grid reached a crescendo that triggered the activation of systems Dr. Chen's team had not previously encountered. Deep within the Arctic installation, a chamber that had remained sealed throughout their exploration suddenly opened, revealing technology that operated on principles beyond anything they had witnessed. The Universal Translator appeared as a confluence of crystalline structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between geometric configurations that challenged human depth perception. As team members approached the device, it began generating harmonic frequencies that bypassed auditory processing and conveyed meaning directly to consciousness. Dr. Chen felt concepts forming in her mind that had no equivalent in human language. Ideas about galactic civilizations, interstellar governance, and cosmic responsibilities that expanded her understanding of intelligence and society beyond anything terrestrial experience had prepared her to comprehend. The Universal Translator was not merely converting between different languages, but was facilitating communication between entirely different forms of consciousness. The device's activation coincided with the appearance of holographic figures that possessed the three-dimensional reality of physical presence, despite being composed entirely of light and energy. The builders had finally chosen to reveal themselves directly, using the Universal Translator to bridge the communication gap between species, separated by millions of years of evolutionary development. The lead figure moved with grace that suggested adaptation to low-gravity environments, its elongated limbs and enlarged cranium indicating evolution under conditions radically different from terrestrial parameters. Yet its posture and gestures conveyed intelligence and intentionality that transcended species barriers, communicating concepts that required no translation. Humanity has reached the threshold we established when your species first demonstrated tool-making capabilities, the figure communicated through the Universal Translator, its meaning arriving as complete understanding rather than sequential words. Your discovery of this installation indicates readiness for the next phase of development within the galactic community. Kernel Web security protocols proved irrelevant as the builder's technology operated beyond the reach of human containment measures. The Universal Translator facilitated communication that bypassed all attempts at information control, establishing direct contact between terrestrial and galactic authorities that transcended governmental jurisdiction. The builders explained that Earth was one of thousands of worlds where they had guided the development of intelligent species over the past 100 million years. Each civilization followed a similar progression from primitive tool use to space exploration, with the builders providing subtle guidance while allowing natural development to determine each species' unique characteristics. Your species has demonstrated the creativity, adaptability, and ethical development necessary for membership in the Galactic Confederation. The lead figure continued, its communication carrying emotional undertones that suggested genuine satisfaction with humanity's progress. The monitoring phase of your development is now complete. Dr. Chen realized that humanity was receiving formal recognition as a mature, intelligent species from authorities whose civilization spanned multiple galaxies. The builders had been evaluating human development for millions of years, and their decision to establish direct contact represented acceptance into a community of intelligence that exceeded her wildest scientific speculations. The Universal Translator revealed that the builders themselves were not the ultimate authorities in the galactic community, but served as mentors and guides for younger civilizations under the oversight of even more ancient intelligences. The cosmic hierarchy extended through levels of development that measured progress in terms of millions of years and technological capabilities that approached manipulation of fundamental physical constants. Nukka listened to the builders' communication with recognition that came from traditional stories passed down through countless generations. The Sky Teachers had finally revealed themselves as his people's legends had always predicted, validating indigenous knowledge that had preserved accurate historical information through oral tradition spanning thousands of years. The builders acknowledged that human civilization faced challenges that required galactic-level resources to resolve successfully. Climate change, resource depletion, and social conflicts that seemed insurmountable from terrestrial perspectives were routine problems that the galactic community had solved using technologies and social systems that had been refined through millions of years of experience. Your species will now receive direct assistance in developing sustainable technologies, social structures, and ethical frameworks necessary for long-term survival and prosperity, the lead figure explained. The transition period will require approximately 50 of your years, during which human civilization will gradually integrate with galactic standards. Colonel Webb's attempts to negotiate governmental control over the contact process were politely but firmly dismissed, as the builders explained that their authority derived from cosmic principles that preceded and superseded terrestrial political systems. Humanity's integration into the galactic community would occur according to protocols that had been successfully applied to thousands of other civilizations. The Universal Translator began downloading information directly into the minds of all present, conveying knowledge about galactic history, interstellar travel, sustainable energy systems, and social organization principles that would transform human civilization beyond recognition. The education process was beginning immediately, with selected individuals serving as initial conduits for knowledge that would eventually spread throughout the entire species. The builders' decision to establish direct contact with humanity triggered global events that exceeded even the most extreme predictions of government emergency planners. Installations that had remained hidden for millions of years revealed themselves simultaneously across all continents, their emergence creating phenomena that couldn't be concealed from civilian populations or explained away as natural occurrences. The Truth Beacon activated as part of the worldwide revelation, its influence extending far beyond the Arctic installation to affect human consciousness on a global scale. The device generated energy fields that made deception impossible within its range of influence, forcing unprecedented honesty from political leaders, military officials, and corporate authorities who had built careers on carefully managed information control. Dr. Chen watched in amazement as the Truth Beacon's effects spread throughout the government personnel at the site. Colonel Webb found himself unable to maintain the security protocols he had been ordered to enforce, compelled by forces beyond. His control to acknowledge the impossibility of containing information that transcended human authority to classify or restrict. World leaders attempting to manage public reaction to the global revelations discovered that their usual strategies of denial, misdirection, and gradual disclosure were rendered ineffective by the Truth Beacon's influence. Press conferences became exercises in unwilling transparency as officials found themselves compelled to provide accurate information regardless of political consequences. The device operated according to principles that affected human neurological processes, at levels deeper than conscious thought. Attempts to lie or deceive triggered physical discomfort that escalated to genuine pain, while truthful communication produced sensations of relief and well-being that reinforced honest interaction. Global communication networks experienced unprecedented changes as the truth beacon's influence spread through fiber optic cables and wireless transmissions. Social media platforms, news organizations, and government communication systems found their content automatically filtered to remove false information, creating a sudden outbreak of accuracy that disrupted information ecosystems built on controlled ambiguity. Religious leaders worldwide discovered that the truth beacon compelled acknowledgement of the spiritual implications of contact with galactic civilizations. Ancient texts and traditional beliefs were revealed as containing accurate historical information about humanity's relationship with cosmic intelligences, forcing re-examination of theological concepts that had been interpreted metaphorically for thousands of years. Stock markets crashed as corporate executives found themselves unable to maintain the strategic deceptions that sustained artificially inflated valuations. Financial systems built on managed information flow collapsed within hours as the truth beacon forced transparent reporting of actual assets, liabilities, and business practices. The device's influence extended to personal relationships as individuals found themselves compelled to acknowledge truths they had been avoiding or suppressing. Marriages, friendships, and family dynamics experienced sudden crises as people discovered they could no longer maintain the comfortable lies that had preserved social stability. Dr. Chen realized that the truth beacon was not merely a technological device, but a social transformation tool designed to prepare civilizations for integration into galactic communities where deception was apparently impossible or unnecessary. The builders had created a forced evolution in human communication patterns that would establish prerequisites for interstellar cooperation. Nukka observed the global transformation with understanding drawn from traditional knowledge about truth-telling, ceremonies that had been practiced by indigenous cultures for thousands of years. His people had maintained social rituals designed to promote honesty and resolve conflicts through transparent communication, apparently preserving practices that prepared them for exactly this kind of cosmic transition. Government attempts to maintain classified information proved futile, as the truth beacon's influence made secrecy physically uncomfortable for anyone attempting to withhold relevant information. Military personnel found themselves disclosing decades of concealed operations, while intelligence agencies discovered that their agents could no longer maintain cover identities or operational security. The truth beacon's effects created social upheaval that challenged fundamental assumptions about privacy, security, and information control. Educational systems, legal frameworks, and economic structures that depended on selective disclosure of information required immediate restructuring to accommodate unprecedented transparency. International relations experienced radical transformation as diplomatic personnel found themselves unable to maintain the strategic ambiguities that had characterized negotiations for centuries. Treaties, trade agreements, and military alliances were renegotiated within days as parties discovered they could only communicate their genuine intentions and capabilities. Media organizations struggled to adapt to news environments where sources could no longer provide misleading information, and politicians could not evade direct questions with practiced deflection techniques. Journalism evolved overnight from investigation of hidden truths to management of overwhelming transparency. As the truth beacon's influence stabilized into permanent global effect, Dr. Chen understood that humanity was experiencing the first phase of social evolution necessary for membership in galactic civilization. The builders had eliminated deception as a viable human behavior pattern, forcing the species to develop communication systems based on complete honesty and transparent cooperation. The cosmic event the builders had long anticipated began with subtle changes in electromagnetic readings that Dr. Chen's instruments detected hours before any visible phenomena appeared. Space-time distortions registered by the quantum communicator network indicated the approach of forces that operated on scales beyond terrestrial experience, their influence detectable across interstellar distances. Within the Arctic installation, the dimensional stabilizer activated with urgency that suggested the approaching event posed genuine threats to planetary survival. The device resembled a crystalline matrix that extended through multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, its structure becoming more complex and incomprehensible as it reached full operational status in response to cosmic conditions that threatened Earth's stability. The builders' holographic representatives explained that the galaxy periodically experienced dimensional rifts that could destabilize space-time within entire star systems. These cosmic storms occurred roughly every 26 million years, coinciding with the solar system's passage through regions of space where dark matter concentrations created unpredictable effects on physical constants. Your species' development has been carefully timed to ensure technological readiness before the next dimensional cascade, the lead builder communicated through the universal translator, its meaning carrying undertones of concern that transcended species barriers. Without stabilization technology, Earth would experience reality distortions that would make complex life impossible. Dr. Chen watched in fascination as the dimensional stabilizer generated energy fields that extended far beyond the Arctic installation, creating protective barriers that encompassed the entire planet. Satellite data confirmed that similar stabilizers at grid installations worldwide were coordinating their activities to establish a comprehensive defense system against forces that could literally tear apart the fabric of space-time. The approaching cosmic event manifested as aurora-like phenomena that appeared simultaneously at both polar regions. But these displays possessed characteristics that no natural aurora had ever exhibited. The lights moved in geometric patterns that suggested intelligence, while their colors included frequencies beyond the normal visible spectrum that created visual effects impossible under standard physics. David Park's instruments registered gravitational anomalies that indicated the cosmic event was affecting the fundamental structure of reality itself. Time flow became inconsistent across different geographical regions, with some areas experiencing temporal acceleration while others slowed to near-static conditions. Without the dimensional stabilizer's protection, these variations would have been catastrophic. The stabilizer operated by creating localized space-time frameworks that maintained consistent physical laws within its operational range. Dr. Chen realized she was witnessing technology that treated the basic constants of physics as variables that could be adjusted according to environmental requirements, capabilities that exceeded theoretical frameworks by millions of years of development. Global communication systems experienced disruptions as electromagnetic radiation encountered regions where the speed of light fluctuated according to cosmic conditions beyond Earth's atmosphere. The builder's quantum communication network remained functional, providing the only reliable information exchange during the reality storm that engulfed the solar system. Nukka observed the cosmic event with understanding, drawn from traditional stories about the time of sky dancing, when the boundary between worlds became thin and spirits from distant realms could enter earthly reality. Indigenous knowledge had preserved accurate descriptions of dimensional instabilities that occurred on cosmic timescales, validating oral traditions that academic science had dismissed as mythology. The dimensional stabilizer's influence extended beyond physical protection to include consciousness stabilization that prevented the psychological trauma that reality distortions could inflict on unprepared minds. Humans worldwide experienced strange dreams and altered perceptions, but the stabilizer's effects ensured that these experiences remained within tolerable limits. Astronomical observations revealed that other star systems within the cosmic storm's path were experiencing catastrophic effects. Planets without stabilizer protection suffered reality breaks that made their surfaces uninhabitable, while civilizations lacking appropriate technology faced extinction as their worlds became incompatible with the physical laws necessary for life. The builders explained that the dimensional cascade was a natural phenomenon that served as an evolutionary filter for galactic civilizations. Species that achieved sufficient technological sophistication to survive the cosmic storms joined the galactic community, while those that failed to develop appropriate defenses were eliminated by forces beyond any individual world's ability to control. Colonel Webb's military advisors realized that humanity's survival depended entirely on technology provided by the builders, establishing a relationship of absolute dependency that made conventional concepts of national sovereignty irrelevant. Earth's continued existence required ongoing cooperation with galactic authorities, whose protection was the only barrier against cosmic forces that could annihilate the planet. As the dimensional stabilizer maintained its protective fields against reality distortions that would have destroyed human civilization, Dr. Chen understood that Earth's integration into the galactic community was not optional, but essential for species survival in a universe where cosmic storms regularly tested the technological capabilities of intelligent life. The aftermath of the cosmic event revealed changes in human consciousness that extended far beyond the immediate crisis of planetary survival. Dr. Chen discovered that exposure to the dimensional stabilizer's protective fields had fundamentally altered human cognitive capabilities, expanding awareness to encompass concepts that had previously been beyond terrestrial comprehension. Deep within the Arctic installation, a chamber that had remained sealed throughout the cosmic storm, open to reveal the builder's greatest gift to humanity. The Wisdom Archive appeared as a crystalline repository that contained the accumulated knowledge of thousands of galactic civilizations, their discoveries and insights preserved across millions of years of interstellar cooperation and cosmic exploration. The archive's structure defied conventional understanding of information storage, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions while maintaining accessibility to three-dimensional consciousness through interfaces that adapted to individual cognitive capabilities. As Dr. Chen approached the device, she felt her awareness expanding to encompass perspectives that transcended human experience. Knowledge flowed directly into her consciousness without requiring traditional learning processes. Scientific principles that would have required decades of study to master became immediately comprehensible, while philosophical concepts that had puzzled human thinkers for millennia revealed themselves as elementary lessons in cosmic understanding. The Wisdom Archive contained detailed records of how thousands of intelligent species had navigated the transition from planetary to galactic citizenship. Each civilization had faced similar challenges related to resource management, social organization, and technological integration, with their solutions preserved as practical guidance for newly inducted species. David Park experienced direct download of mathematical principles that operated on scales encompassing multiple universes. his consciousness expanding to accommodate concepts about reality structures that made terrestrial physics seem like elementary arithmetic. The knowledge came not as abstract theory, but as practical understanding that enabled immediate application of principles governing interstellar travel and dimensional manipulation. Nukka's interaction with the Wisdom Archive revealed that indigenous knowledge systems had preserved fragments of galactic wisdom through oral traditions that maintained accuracy across thousands of years. Traditional stories about star people, sky roads, and cosmic cycles contained literal truth about interstellar civilization that academic science was only beginning to comprehend. The archive documented the development of ethical frameworks that enabled peaceful cooperation between species whose evolutionary histories had produced radically different approaches to concepts like individual identity, social responsibility, and resource allocation. These philosophical systems provided templates for resolving conflicts that seemed irreconcilable from purely human perspectives. Dr. Chen discovered sections of the archive that contained technological specifications for devices that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level, generate energy by accessing zero-point quantum fluctuations, and create transportation systems that treated interstellar distances as minor inconveniences rather than insurmountable barriers. The builders explained that access to the Wisdom Archive was humanity's graduation gift from their probationary status to full membership in the galactic community. The knowledge contained within the repository would enable human civilization to solve every major challenge facing the species, while developing capabilities necessary for meaningful contribution to interstellar society. Colonel Webb found his military training completely redefined as the archive revealed conflict resolution methods that had eliminated warfare between galactic civilizations millions of years ago. The knowledge showed him social organizational principles that made traditional concepts of military force obsolete while ensuring security through cooperation rather than deterrence. The archive's medical knowledge provided solutions to diseases and aging processes that had plagued humanity throughout recorded history. Genetic engineering techniques that operated with precision exceeding terrestrial capabilities by millions of years offered pathways to physical enhancement that would eliminate suffering while preserving the essential characteristics that made human consciousness unique. Environmental restoration technologies detailed in the archive could reverse centuries of ecological damage within decades, while establishing sustainable systems that would maintain planetary health indefinitely. The knowledge provided practical methods for transforming Earth into a garden world that could support billions of inhabitants without environmental degradation. Social organizational models preserved in the archive demonstrated governmental structures that had successfully managed civilizations spanning multiple star systems for millions of years. These systems eliminated poverty, inequality, and resource conflicts while preserving individual freedom and cultural diversity that enriched galactic civilization. As the Wisdom Archive continued downloading knowledge directly into human consciousness, Dr. Chen realized that humanity was receiving the educational foundation necessary to become productive members of a cosmic community whose achievements exceeded every aspiration terrestrial civilization had ever conceived. The transformation was irreversible and unprecedented in human history. Within hours, select individuals had acquired knowledge that positioned them as bridges between terrestrial limitations and galactic possibilities, their enhanced understanding serving as the foundation for species-wide evolution that would unfold over the coming decades. The archive's final gift was perspective. understanding of humanity's place within cosmic history that revealed the species as part of an ancient tradition of intelligence that had been developing throughout the universe for billions of years. Each new member contributing unique insights that enriched the collective wisdom of galactic civilization. 3 months after the cosmic event, Nukka stood on the same Arctic ice where his world had changed forever, but the landscape around him bore little resemblance to the frozen wasteland that had nearly claimed his life. The builders' environmental restoration systems had transformed the region into a thriving ecosystem, where Arctic plants bloomed in impossible abundance despite the polar location. The Covenant Stone rested in a place of honor at the center of what had become humanity's first official embassy to galactic civilization. The artifact served as both symbol and functional device, its crystalline structure maintaining constant communication with the builders while documenting the agreements that would guide human development for centuries to come. The stone itself appeared deceptively simple, a translucent crystal roughly the size of a human torso, its surface smooth except for the flowing symbols that recorded every commitment made between humanity and their galactic mentors. When touched by human hands, the Covenant Stone displayed holographic records of the transformation process, showing how quickly terrestrial civilization had adapted to cosmic citizenship. Dr. Chen, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to galactic affairs, reviewed the changes that had swept across human society with speed that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Technologies derived from the Wisdom Archive had eliminated energy scarcity within weeks, while medical advances had begun extending human lifespan and eliminating genetic diseases that had plagued the species throughout recorded history. The village of Ikeuak had become a pilgrimage destination for people worldwide who sought to understand the transformation occurring within their own communities. Nukka found himself serving as an informal guide for visitors who came to see where humanity's greatest discovery had occurred, though he remained fundamentally the same man who had valued traditional wisdom and practical knowledge above abstract theories. The old people were right, Anana reflected as she observed the constant stream of scientists, government officials, and curiosity seekers who came to learn about the contact process. They always said the time would come when the sky teachers would reveal themselves to help us grow beyond what we thought possible. The Covenant Stone recorded agreements that established Earth as a protected world during the transition period, with galactic authorities providing guidance and support, while humanity gradually assumed responsibility for planetary management and interstellar cooperation. The timeline extended across 50 years, allowing multiple generations to adapt to changes that would transform every aspect of human existence. Nukka's role had evolved from simple hunter to humanity's first indigenous ambassador, his traditional knowledge providing crucial insights into sustainable living practices that impressed even advanced galactic civilizations. The builders had specifically requested his participation in developing integration protocols that preserved cultural diversity while promoting technological advancement. The environmental transformation extended far beyond the Arctic, with similar changes occurring at every grid installation worldwide. Deserts bloomed with vegetation adapted to arid conditions, while polluted rivers and lakes achieved pristine clarity through biological systems that processed contaminants more efficiently than any technological solution. David Park, now studying at galactic universities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, returned periodically to document humanity's progress for archives that would guide future civilizations through similar transitions. His research contributed to databases that helped optimize the contact process for species. Throughout the galaxy, the Covenant Stone's records showed remarkable human adaptability to changes that had challenged other species for centuries. Terrestrial civilizations' diversity of cultures and biological variations had prepared humanity uniquely well for integration into galactic society, where difference was valued as a source of innovation and wisdom. Social conflicts that had seemed intractable before contact were being resolved using mediation techniques that drew from millions of years of galactic experience with interspecies cooperation. The Truth Beacon's influence had eliminated deception as a barrier to honest negotiation, while Wisdom Archive knowledge provided frameworks for sustainable solutions. Colonel Webb had transitioned from military service to become Earth's security liaison with galactic peacekeeping, forces that maintained stability across thousands of star systems without using weapons or coercive force. His experience managing crisis situations had proven valuable in coordinating emergency responses during the transition period as Nukka prepared for his next journey to galactic headquarters, a facility that existed in folded space. Accessible through the enhanced Arctic installation, he reflected on the hunter's instincts that had guided him safely through changes that exceeded anything his ancestors could have imagined. The Covenant Stone pulsed gently as he placed his hand on its surface, recording his thoughts and experiences as part of humanity's ongoing contribution to galactic civilization. His story would be preserved alongside those of countless other beings whose discoveries had advanced the cosmic community's understanding of intelligence, courage, and adaptation. The ice beneath his feet no longer concealed ancient secrets, but served as foundation for humanity's future among the stars, where traditional wisdom and cosmic knowledge would combine to create possibilities that neither could achieve alone.